She has lied for him, schemed for him, and stood by his side through the worst scandal of his life. But now, in one of the most brutal turnarounds the Cobbles have seen in months, George Shuttleworth has turned his back on Christina Boyd, and Weatherfield's most unlikely power couple could be finished for good. If you thought Corrie had already put these two through the ringer, think again, because what's coming next is set to leave Christina broken, humiliated, and utterly alone. Stick around, because we're breaking down exactly what's happened, why it's happened, and what it means for two of Coronation Street's most talked about characters. Welcome back to the channel, soap fans. If you're new here, this is your home for all things Coronation Street, the twists, the fallouts, the heartbreak, and everything in between. Today we're diving into a story that has been quietly building for months and has now exploded into one of the most emotionally charged plots on the Cobbles, the sudden and devastating breakdown of the relationship between Undertaker George Shuttleworth and his on-off partner in life and business, Christina Boyd. Fans have watched this pairing lurch from chaos to comedy to genuine tenderness, and now it looks like it's heading somewhere far darker, as George finally puts his foot down and Christina is left to face the fallout entirely on her own. For anyone who hasn't been following every twist of this roller coaster, let's rewind a little and set the scene, because there's a lot of history packed into this relationship. George Shuttleworth, the mild-mannered, endlessly good-hearted funeral director played with such warmth by Tony Maudsley, has spent years quietly running Shuttleworth's funeral parlor, trying to live up to the legacy left by his late father. George is the kind of character viewers instinctively root for, decent, a little awkward, fiercely loyal, and always trying to do the right thing, even when the world seems determined to punish him for it. Into his life came Christina Boyd, played by Sophie Ward, a woman with a far murkier past than George could ever have imagined. Christina first made waves on the Cobbles when she returned to Weatherfield claiming her partner Dom had died, a story that turned out to be tangled up in a cruel catfishing scam aimed squarely at Jenny Connor. It was Jenny, in fact, who tried to expose Christina and Dom as con artists, tearing open a coffin in a desperate bid to prove her suspicions right. Despite that shaky, scandal-soaked introduction, Christina somehow talked her way into George's affections and, eventually, into his business as well, becoming his partner both professionally and romantically. From the very start, this was never a relationship built on a stable foundation. Glenda Shuttleworth, George's ever-watchful sister, warned him early on not to trust Christina and practically begged him to consider Jenny instead, convinced that Jenny's obvious feelings for George were the safer, kinder option. George, however, has always had a soft spot for a woman who can talk circles around him, and Christina's brash confidence proved impossible for him to resist. Over the following months, the pair became inseparable, running the funeral parlor together and leaning on each other through crisis after crisis. But cracks were always visible beneath the surface. Christina has a habit of putting her foot in it at the worst possible moments, and George has quietly absorbed blow after blow to his reputation, partly because of decisions Christina made on his behalf. That pattern reached a breaking point earlier this year, when George found himself at the center of a devastating smear campaign. After a client left him a generous sum in her will, her furious daughter Annie accused George of manipulating a vulnerable, dying woman for money. What should have been a straightforward, if unexpected, act of gratitude spiraled into a full-blown scandal, with Annie spreading vicious rumors around Weatherfield and eventually threatening legal action. George, a man whose entire sense of self is built around honesty and integrity, was left reeling, terrified that decades of his father's hard work and his own good name were about to be destroyed in a matter of weeks. And in the middle of all that chaos, Christina didn't always help matters. At one particularly excruciating moment, she made a careless joke about George's charm winning over wealthy clients, right within earshot of a potential customer, the kind of comment that poured fuel directly onto an already raging fire. George was left doing damage control, both for his business and, in many ways, for his relationship. That backdrop is crucial to understanding what's happening now, because it shows a pattern that has been building for a long time. George has spent this entire storyline absorbing consequences that often trace back, at least in part, to Christina's impulsiveness, her sharp tongue, or her shady past catching up with them both. Viewers have watched him defend her time and time again, insisting to friends and family that she means well, even as the evidence is piled up that being with Christina comes at a cost. According to the latest spoilers and reports circulating from those close to the show, that cost has finally become too high for George to keep paying, and the fallout is set to be one of the most emotionally raw stretches this pairing has ever faced. So, what exactly is going on now? Sources close to the show have indicated that George has reached a genuine turning point in how he sees Christina, and it isn't simply another rocky patch that gets smoothed over with a joke and a hug at the Rovers. This time, the rejection appears to cut far deeper, striking at the heart of whether George can actually trust Christina at all, both as a business partner and as someone he's supposed to love. Whether it's fallout from the ongoing scrutiny of the funeral parlor, resentment simmering over how much damage her past has done to his reputation, or George simply reaching his limit after being repeatedly let down, the result is the same. He pulls away, and he does it decisively. For a man as gentle and conflict-averse as George, that kind of firm, unwavering stance is a massive character shift, and it signals just how seriously the show is treating this breakdown. And it's Christina's reaction that's really got fans talking. Far from her usual brash, unshakable exterior, reports suggest we're about to see a much rawer, more vulnerable side of her, as she struggles to process being shut out by the one person who has consistently stood by her since she arrived on the cobbles. This is a woman who has survived scandal after scandal through sheer bravado, someone who always seems to have another scheme, another joke, another way to talk herself out of trouble. Watching that confidence crumble, watching her slip into real despair rather than simply shrugging off another setback, marks new emotional territory for the character, and it's exactly the kind of shift that makes soap fans sit up and pay attention. Naturally, the online reaction has been intense. Across social media, fans have been dissecting every trailer clip and every hint from the cast, trying to figure out exactly how far this rejection goes and whether there's any coming back from it. Some viewers are firmly Team George, arguing that he deserves a partner who doesn't constantly drag chaos into his life, and that this is long overdue after everything Christina has put him through. Others feel for Christina, pointing out that beneath the scheming exterior, she has shown real loyalty to George, particularly when his business and reputation were under fire, and that watching her spiral into despair is genuinely difficult to see. There's also a significant portion of the fanbase revisiting the long-running Jenny Connor angle, wondering aloud whether this is the door swinging back open for Jenny, who has never quite hidden her feelings for George despite years of near misses and bad timing. Entertainment outlets covering the soap have picked up on this shift too, framing it as one of the more unpredictable relationship stories currently running on the cobbles, precisely because George's usual conflict-avoidant nature makes this rejection feel so much more significant than it might for a more volatile character. So, what could this mean going forward, both for the story and for the characters at the center of it? If George truly is drawing a hard line with Christina, the ripple effects could reach far beyond the two of them. The funeral parlor itself may be thrown into fresh uncertainty, given that George and Christina have been running Shuttleworths together, and any romantic fallout is almost certain to spill over into their working relationship as well. There's also the small matter of where Christina goes from here emotionally. Despair on a soap rarely stays contained, and if the show is committing to showing her genuinely broken by this rejection, it opens the door to all sorts of dramatic possibilities, from Christina lashing out in ways that could deepen the rift with George, to a slower, more introspective storyline where she's forced to confront the consequences of her past choices for the first time in a real way. Then there's the Jenny question, which fans simply cannot stop talking about. Given how much of this relationship has played out against the backdrop of Jenny's unresolved feelings for George, It would hardly be surprising if the show uses this rejection as a stepping stone toward reigniting that old spark, even if George isn't remotely ready to jump into something new. Soaps love a slow-burn love triangle, and Corrie has spent a long time laying the groundwork for exactly this kind of pivot. Whether the show actually goes there, or whether George simply needs time alone to rebuild his sense of self after months of scandal and stress, remains to be seen, but it's clear the writers have set up plenty of directions this story could take. There's also a broader question worth considering about what this arc says about George as a character. For years, he's been portrayed as almost endlessly forgiving, the kind of man who absorbs hurt rather than dishing it out. Watching him finally reach a limit, finally say enough is enough, could mark a genuine turning point in how the show writes him going forward, giving Tony Maudsley some meaty, dramatic material to work with after a long stretch of George largely reacting to chaos rather than driving it. For Sophie Ward's Christina, meanwhile, this could be the moment that finally humanizes a character who has often been played for laughs or suspicion, giving viewers a reason to actually feel for her rather than simply waiting to see what she'll get up to next. Of course, with soap storylines, nothing is ever quite as final as it first appears, and Corrie has a long history of pulling couples back from the brink just when fans think it's truly over. It wouldn't be the first time a devastating rejection on the cobbles turned out to be a temporary blip rather than a permanent split, and there's every chance George and Christina could find their way back to each other once the dust settles, assuming the trust between them can ever really be repaired. But for now, all signs point to a genuinely painful chapter for this pairing, with Christina facing real consequences for a pattern of behavior that has finally caught up with her, and George stepping into a firmer, more assertive version of himself that longtime fans may not even recognize. So to sum it all up, Coronation Street looks to be steering George Shuttleworth and Christina Boyd toward one of their most serious ruptures yet, following months of scandal, smear campaigns, and simmering tension that has finally pushed George past his breaking point. Christina, so often the one calling the shots and talking her way out of trouble, now finds herself on the receiving end of real heartbreak, with despair setting in as she faces the possibility of losing George for good. Whether this is the end of the road for the pair, a painful but temporary setback, or the beginning of a fresh chapter involving Jenny Connor, one thing is certain: Weatherfield is about to get a whole lot messier. That's everything we know so far about this dramatic turn for George and Christina on Coronation Street. What do you think? Is George right to walk away? Or is Christina getting a raw deal after everything she's been through? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more Coronation Street news, spoilers, and updates as this story continues to unfold. We'll see you in the next one.